There's no doubt that Hell is Us is a challenging game, but you could be making it even harder on yourself by not taking advantage of some of the weapons, skills, and secret items that the game has to offer. Hey everyone, this is Chaz Plays Games, my name is Chaz, and the game that I'm having an absolute blast playing is Hell is Us. So let me break down some of the biggest mistakes that I'm seeing new players make, as well as just some general tips to help you get the most out of your playthrough. Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I'm seeing new players make is exploring a little bit too much. Now I know that's a strange thing to say for a game that is based on exploration, but let me explain what I mean. Throughout the game, you're going to find a ton of keys and chests and notes and doors that you're going to have no idea what to do with. And in a traditional game, the thing you need to solve that mystery is usually somewhere in the immediate area, or at least in that specific level. But that is not the case in Hell is Us. Some mysteries or even full-on areas you discover early, you're not going to be able to solve or access until much later in the game. So my best advice here is once you uncover a new mysterious item, make note of it, including any symbols or colors that are on it, and then try your best to move on. In my first playthrough, I spent a ton of time trying to solve every mystery and unlock every door, only to realize that it's not going to be an item that I'm going to get until much later in the game. So try to get comfortable not trying to solve every mystery straight away, and don't get too bogged down trying to find a specific item. Now the flip side to that is sometimes when you're on a mission to find a specific thing, you end up finding a whole bunch of other things. So I'm definitely not saying to don't explore. Just don't get too fixated trying to find a specific thing because you might not get that item until much later on in the game. The good news here is that you're not going to get locked out of any area in the game, even in the later stages, so you'll have the opportunity to revisit all of those areas to unlock those mysteries. Now, if you stumble onto something you're going to want to come back to later on, like a chest or a locked door, you're going to want to make a note of where you found it. Pen and paper work well for sure, but for me it was useful to take an in-game screenshot with my compass up. That way I could more easily remember how to navigate back to where I was, or at least give myself some directional clues to find my way back. The game also has a built-in photo mode that's helpful because you can zoom out, which is going to give you a bit more context for your location. Now photo mode is a bit hidden. I'm playing on PC but with a PS5 controller, so for me it's up on the D-pad and then the options button. If you're not sure how to access photo mode on your controller, it should show you in the controls option from your settings. Now be sure that you're also keeping up with the exploration section in your datapad. Once you find a new key or item, it'll show up in the mystery section, and this will help you keep track of all the mysteries you've uncovered, solved, and have yet to find. Now these mysteries are not time locked, so again, if you find something, make note of it and then move on to the next thing, and just know that you'll be able to come back here later on. Now good deed quests on the other hand, which are your NPC quests, are time locked. Once you start a new good deed, you'll want to spend the time to close out that task before progressing too much further in the main story, or you'll risk missing out on that reward. But the tricky thing is you're not really going to know when you've progressed too far into the story, and you will still need to progress the story a little bit because sometimes you'll need to travel to a new area to get the thing you need. So without giving too much away, basically the game is split into 3 chapters. And as a general rule, you'll want to close out the good deeds from each chapter before progressing to the next chapter. Now you won't necessarily know when you've started or stopped the new chapter, but you can pretty much tell just by the length of the main missions. If you find yourself in a long mission where it seems like you're diving deep and the checkpoints aren't allowing you to travel back to your APC, that's a pretty good indication that you might be nearing the end of a chapter, so just make sure you're not progressing too far without closing out those good deeds. Now something that's completely optional and also completely missable are the Vaults of Forbidden Knowledge. These vaults have some of the best loot in the entire game if you're able to crack the code to get inside. There are 6 of these total, with the very first one you're able to find in Sinedra Forest. Now I'm not going to spoil any of the codes for these, but to get the codes you need to turn in research items to Tanya. Once you do, the code will show up in the research tab of your datapad, and then you can head back to that location to open the vault. This is another area of the game where I spent way too much time reading through every note and looking for every clue, trying to find the symbols to unlock the vault, only to realize much later on that it's done through Tanya. So definitely don't make the same mistake I did, and make sure you're turning in those research items and looking for those codes so you can get that loot in the vault. Now when it comes to the game's combat, there are a couple of things that you'll want to keep in mind to help get the most out of your experience. Haze enemies, which are the umbilical ones, are definitely the more challenging ones to defeat because you need to defeat the limbic entity before you can deal damage to the main enemy, but that's not actually the case. If the limbic enemy hasn't yet spawned, you can charge in and deal damage to the main enemy, and if you deal enough damage, you can defeat them entirely, avoiding what could be a lengthy confrontation. So here's a couple strategies to get in some good, quick damage. If you're running a terror build, the Nightfade Glyph will make you completely invisible for up to 30 seconds, giving you a chance to either sneak behind the enemy entirely, or get up and close and personal to deal some damage without spawning the limbic entity. The forward charge module for your drone is also really useful for closing distance quickly before that entity can spawn, so you can deal a bunch of damage. And then the Rage Spike Glyph is also a great option for dealing damage at range. So whatever your build, your weapon, or your drone loadout, make sure you're taking advantage of these open windows so that you can deal at least some amount of damage before the fight even starts. Now another thing that I found was pretty helpful in these scenarios is paying close attention to the enemy's health bar. When the health bar has these little lines in it, that means that you can't deal damage, so if you try, you're just going to be wasting your stamina or your limbic energy. But if the health bar is smooth, that means that the enemy is vulnerable and you can charge in and deal damage. There's usually a bit of a delay in between when you defeat the entity and when you can deal damage to the main enemy, so make sure that you're watching for that health bar to go smooth before charging in. Now I noted in my essential tips and tricks video, which I'll make sure to link in the description below, that the best time to trigger the healing pulse is when those particles around you solidify into that solid ring. But there's also another good indicator of the perfect time to trigger the health pulse that might be a little bit easier for some players. If you look at your health bar as you deal damage, the gray area will appear indicating how much health you can get back. Well, when that gray area turns white, that also indicates when you can trigger the health pulse. So whether you're watching for the solid ring or the white in the health bar, definitely make sure that you're getting in the habit of using that health pulse early and often. Now I would also encourage you not to sleep on the neutral glyphs. These are ones that aren't associated with any limbic sphere and can be attached to any weapon type. In particular, I pretty much had the chromatic shield glyph attached to every weapon I used because it gives you a shield that can last up to 20 seconds, and the elite version gives you up to 80% damage protection. There's also a limbic mending glyph that restores up to 2000 health per second, essentially trading your limbic energy for health, making it a great way to heal in between enemy encounters. Now another thing to note about glyphs and drone modules is to make sure that you're checking the stats for each one so that you know how to properly activate it so you're using it in the correct way. Some glyphs require that you tap to use them, while others require more of a charge up, and others you need to press and hold. Some also require locking on to an enemy in order to use it, so just make sure that you're checking the stats section before equipping it to make sure that you're getting the most out of it. Now another thing you'll want to keep in mind is knowing which type of item you're going to pick up based on the color. I'm sure you've noticed that every item has a color associated with it, either red, yellow, green, or white. Red are your more common items and consumables like shards, med packs, and limbic capacitors. Green are your more uncommon items like your weapons and glyphs. Yellow are your really important items like keys, quest items, and items you need to pick up to complete your good deeds. And white are your miscellaneous word building items like notes and cassettes. Make sure you're on the lookout for these colors so you know which items are worth your time to go explore and to pick up. Anything that's yellow or green, you definitely want to make sure you go out of your way to pick up, whereas red or white, maybe not so much unless you're just looking to collect every single thing in the game. And if you're looking for even more Hell Is Us tips or tricks, I've linked my essential tips and tricks video in the description below, so be sure to check that out. And be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any future content. As always, thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.
Interesting. I'll look it up.